So I would venture to say that he has been too belligerent overseas. In fact, there's been a lot of commentary on how similar his foreign military policy has been with Bush. And too concessionary to corporations here. I think it's pretty offensive that he has met 6 times with the head of Aetna in the White House, 6 times with the head of Pfizer in the White House, and he's refused to meet with one of his longtime friends, the famous Chicago physician, a doctor who started the Physicians Group for a National Health Plan, or single payer. He's never invited him to the White House. So I think he needs to muster more courage. He squandered a lot of public support already. His polls are going down. And I always evaluated him as being conflict averse. He doesn't like to take on big power, and he takes for granted people who have nowhere else to go but to support the Democratic Party. So the progressive liberals, he doesn't give them much time of the day, but he's very attentive to people who have somewhere to go, like corporations.
The other question was, what do you think about Ron Paul's idea to end the private Federal Reserve?
Yeah, it is private in the sense that it's funded by the banks through fees. It's not funded by our congressional appropriations, so it's not really accountable through that way through Congress. You know, it gets its own funding. The banks are on the board of directors heavily on the branches of the Federal Reserve, like the one in Philadelphia, Dallas, New York. And so I think if we're going to have a central bank, it should be like in Western Europe, where they are cabinet-level people. They're like the Secretary of the Treasury. In Western Europe, they call him the Chancellor of the Exchequer, for example, in England. That way, they are accountable to the Parliament, as they should be to our Congress. So I think he's right on that. It just to tell you, it was only a few years ago, nobody heard of Ron Paul. He was considered the laughingstock in the House for the wrong reason, because he would dissent, even if it was the only vote. And the minute he got on the debates in the presidential election with his fellow Republicans, he became sensational in a lot of quarters. Tens of millions of people now know him. You see the power getting on the debates. I was left off the debates. I was excluded because the Debate Commission is a private company created in 1987 by the Republican Democratic parties, dressed up with an official name like Commission on Presidential Debates, which is not official, it's just a private corporation. And the two parties decide who's going to debate. And guess what? They don't want anyone else besides themselves, and they curtail the number between them of 3 debates and a very, very patsy selection of reporters. Imagine if Amy Goodman was one of the reporters. As you know. So they pretty much know what the questions are, and they're usually the questions that they've been practicing over the years. So they're not asked about corporate crime, they're not asked about criminal wars of aggression, or the bloated, wasteful military budget, or the lack of consumer protection. It's a farce, which is a tragedy. So Ron Paul showed, he gets on 6 debates. He doesn't get as much time as McCain and others in the Republican primary, but he got to get his points across. People say, hey, what's going on here? You got a fresh voice. Now, there are things that I think he's zany on, like he does not like health and safety regulation. And I just don't understand that, because, you know, when are you going to go through life refusing to inhale pollution? You know? You got to have law and order. So he's got that problem. But on foreign military policy, he's pretty good. He doesn't believe in wars of aggression, doesn't believe in empires. He believes in an accountable central bank, and quite a few other things I think are pretty sensible. But again, you never heard of him if he hadn't got on the debates. So we got to take the debate, the presidential debates, away from the parties. And